In this cup, I have a half cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide, a kind of big squirt of dish soap, and about 4 drops of food coloring. So you'll notice that it didn't rise. It did bubble a little bit, but I think that's more just to do with the dish soap reacting. And there is a reason with this that I will explain, a reason for this that I will explain in my presentation. But unfortunately, my elephant toothpaste did fail.
Sorry. To make elephant toothpaste, you need hydrogen peroxide, dish soap, food coloring. Well, you don't need food coloring, but if you want to add color, you need food coloring, and then you need dry yeast. So for the reaction and why elephant toothpaste occurs. So hydrogen peroxide is a solution made from hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Its formula is H2O2. When the hydrogen peroxide breaks down, it results in oxygen or O2 and water, H2O. The reaction is typically pretty slow, and we're not gonna see it happen really quickly if we're just watching it, but it can be sped up by adding a catalyst. So for this experiment, the catalyst is the dry yeast, and the combination of the yeast and the hydrogen peroxide breaks the hydrogen peroxide down really, really quickly, which then forms bubbles. So under normal conditions, the bubbles would just kind of come out of the liquid and pop really quickly and just disappear. But with the addition of the dish soap, there's an added kind of surface tension, which causes the bubbles to be trapped, and then you have the really fun foam, which then explodes out. The dye just adds some fun color to the foam. So if you watched my video, obviously my experiment did not work. It was very sad. There were a few bubbles, but other than that, there was no evidence of a chemical reaction, and the bubbles were just the dish soap kind of interacting with the addition of liquid. So my hydrogen peroxide did not break down, and then thus there was no foam and no fun evidence of a reaction. The reason my experiment failed was the yeast I used. So for the experiment, for the experiment, I used a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution, some dish soap, a few drops of food coloring, and yeast. However, I was forced to use nutritional yeast because all of the stores that I went to were out of yeast. I went to 4. I would have gone to 5, but I didn't have time, and literally every single store I went to was out of dry yeast. I asked if they had any in the back, and they were like, no, and the baking truck, or the truck with the baking goods, is already gone. There was no dry yeast. And the only yeast I could find was nutritional yeast. I still wanted to be able to do the experiment, so I bought the nutritional yeast. Obviously did not work out, and here we are. So the yeast is meant to act as a catalyst, but the nutritional yeast has a lot of added ingredients, and it is not they're not interchangeable ingredients, so they're not the same kind of thing. So the nutritional yeast is a deactivated yeast, while dry yeast is activated. They're super different products, and so it just did not work, and it really messed with the effectiveness of the yeast's ability to act as said catalyst because it was not the yeast needed. I could have also tried to use a higher concentration of hydrogen peroxide. I used 3%. I don't think it really would have made a difference or made the reaction more effective just because of the difference in product of nutritional yeast versus dry yeast. I wish I had been able to find dry yeast and see the reaction through, but here we are. Sometimes reactions don't work. Clearly mine did not, but I do think that I still understand the basis of the reaction and why it should have worked if I had had the correct reactants. My roommate was very disappointed. She wanted to see the elephant toothpaste and she wanted to see the foam. Alas, there was no yeast. So thank you and have a good week.